Welcome to Portals of Perception and to current openings. What the world doesn't quite get yet. David, it's good to have you back in this current openings space together with me as we forge into the unknown. Yeah. Well, so we thought today was going to be a working session, and we didn't know whether we were going to record anything. We thought it was going to be a planning and working session about the next few steps. And something else happened, and we've been quickened in the last 24 hours. And we think, therefore, we are ready to launch into a current openings number 15, episode 15. And my proposed working title, because we had no time to exchange on this, is the 4 transformation zones, all as part of our bigger frame at the moment, which is the Human Development Challenge / the Human Development Opportunity. And we want to explore the 4 development zones, and reflect on the impulses that are coming our way through other people, through feedback, through the needs we see in the world, and travel through these 4 zones and offer some high-level comments about the development challenge and opportunity in each of the 4 zones, and then potentially come back and do a deeper dive in each of the 4 zones. So how about that and that literally happened in the last 24 hours. I pulled together some slides last night and this morning to give us a scaffolds for the journey. Are you ready to play in current open?
Make a start. Ready to play and see what we get to. Absolutely.
Okay. So even before I bring the first slide, I will say that what that experience revealed to me was that the current openings dynamic is alive, has its own vibrant intelligence, because we didn't plan, and this is something we are nudged into. And I pay attention to that because that has happened to us right from the first episode, where we got together and we said, let's just record. And then it happened when we did a journey realignment on episode 4. And my initial instinct about today was that we needed to come back to where we started, because our episode 1 was esoteric truth.
Yes.
And a few days ago, I emailed very briefly to you and I said, maybe we should come back to truth and explore in even a bigger way what is truth, how to think about truth, in this day and age where we have a lot of distortion of truth and a lot of fake truth, and it becomes a much more difficult subject or domain to explore. So that's where I was a few days ago, and then I stepped back and I said, no, actually, the truth is 1 out of 4 zones. The search for truth is what we often call a zone 3. And that's when I said, let us actually take a step back and reflect on all of those 4 zones, right?
Yep.
Zone 1, the personal development. Zone 2, the collective development space. Zone 3, the search for truth. And Zone 4, taking really all the work you do in Zone 1, 2, and 3 to create an even bigger impact in the nearby world around you and in the world at large. And when we think about these as 4 zones of development, 4 zones of transformation, In zone 1, I seek to transform me. In zone 2, we together seek to transform ourselves, transform us. In zone 3, we ask, well, so how can we update and transform the process by which we make sense and meaning, such that we may be able to, in a deeper way, fuller way, access truth. And then how can we bring the personal development and transformation, the collective development and transformation, and our sense of the mapping of what the case is in zone 3 into an effective way to transform reality. So it seems to me, David, and I'm very curious how you feel about this, that the impulse of current openings for us emerged and continues to evolve in zone 3 as a first impulse. And in different times and different spaces, we may come zone 1 first and then do zone 1 in zone 3 or zone 2 in zone 3, which is something I'm doing with other parallel endeavors and conversations, several conversations and series generated on portals. They're very much an endeavor in zone 2. I started and are developing an endeavor we call Evolving Together, 3-way exploration that will grow, and that's by definition a zone 2 inquiry. It seems to me that both your journey and my journey and the way we found ourselves in current openings had about it the stance that in this time where everybody is creating their own map of reality, very much based in their own subjective experience, and then able to curate for themselves the echo chamber that will validate and confirm that, we felt somewhat defiant about this and said, let's do something together that has about it the search for truth. So when we talk about the brain, when we talk about the emotion, when we talk about energy, when we talk about the way polarities play out in our life, let's anchor our inquiry in the search for truth. So what says you?
Well, what says me first off, a little story. I was at the doctor, a urologist, on Thursday, and he asked me what I do for a living. And what came out of my mouth was, well, I'm a teacher of logic. And he looked at me like, oh, well, that sounds interesting. He said, what do you mean by logic? I said, well, trying to get to the truth of what is rather than what I think is. And he went, oh, he said, well, first thing I learned at medical school, and that stuck with him, he's probably in his 50s. And he said, what really stuck with me from medical school is this. He said, today's truth is tomorrow's lie. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And he then gave me an example about the use of aspirin in the world and how it used to be used for everything. And now there's various cautions about it. Not to get into that too much because it's not my exact purview, but this was relating what he was saying. He said, today's truth is tomorrow's lie. And that struck me as quite an extreme statement. Like it wasn't talking about temporary truth. He was talking about it being outright wrong. So I think that's right. I think in this particular time, and I will get into this, but increasingly what I'm discovering is the gap between the psyche, which is to do with what a person thinks is. I'm now kind of getting to this place of seeing how we have incoming data through all 5 senses, and then we interpret that through our personalized psychic factors, our personalized psyche, and that may or may not get us anywhere near the logic of reality. So that's why the study of psychology is such a vast territory, because everybody's psyche is slightly different based on their trauma, based on their ecology they grew up in and everything else. So we get to this point where there can be 8 billion different personalized truths, 8 billion different psyches, all coming up with what I think or the other person thinks is true. And that essential element of getting into, well, what is the truth? And to find that, to be looking beyond what other people have even said in history, but try and go to source. We did that whole session on the natural laws, trying to go straight to source, which is what the human hasn't been able to fiddle about with. What are the actual laws of the universe? And that would give us, from logos to logic, getting to the actual truth of something, not based upon what I think or you think or some wise person, Nobel Prize winner or sage or savior, but based upon what the evidence is direct from the universe to us. So I think that's very accurate, that we came in through that third zone, because that is such a, to me at this time, a missing ingredient, and therefore a very valid zone to come in through. And of course, how that then makes it possible. I think we came in through 3, and we're also trying to do 4, which is by helping point the world toward that kind of search for actual truth, not what I think is truth. That would then have an impact on the world. So we kind of came in through zone 3 and 4, with then touching on zones 1 and 2, but coming in through 3 and 4 as primary access points. Yeah.
Well, so let's build on all this today. And here is what I proposed we do, that we travel through these 4 zones, begin with zone 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4, and recognize that in each of those zones, there is the going high and the going in the middle. And I'm quite deliberate saying the going high and the going in the middle, which includes also going in the low, but I'm framing it as going in the middle because, and I'm suggesting that we explore how those two can become a polarity. And yet, in each of those quadrants, this idea of going high, which sometimes presents itself as up and out, trying to escape the body, trying to escape reality. Sometimes that impulse presents itself in that way. That is the impulse that seeks the idealized, elevated state where bliss is available, and you could say many other words. The going in the middle is the impulse that seeks to manage life pragmatically and effectively. And I'm saying these impulses can show up as a polarity. And given that we have worked earlier this year about polarities and managing polarities and described the 12 moves to transcend, to integrate, to manage polarities, what are some ways to attend to both? So that's the brief I've created for us. And if you're ready, I'd like to jump right into zone 1 and actually go deep in zone 1, because that in many ways in today's exploration will frame the zone 2, 3, and 4 conversation. So in zone 1, the question is, what and how am I transforming me? What and how am I developing or facilitating or enabling myself to develop? So now, what is the in the middle and in the low impulse? Well, it begins in many ways with the desire to relieve suffering, and therefore to release the reactive response system. That's why we brought such emphasis to the idea of working with polarities. And right there, before even I bring the completion of that white space with what's below it, right there, David, is the, I don't know how many $1 billion industry of many Eastern practices, on one hand, and all sorts of effective and powerful Western modalities and therapies and approaches to help alleviate, help relieve suffering. And if I attempted to synthesize the core essence of this huge space, you actually just a minute ago framed it in what you said about Zone 3, which demonstrates so beautifully the relationship and the dynamic between Zone 3 and Zone 1. Because in many therapeutic modalities, therapy approaches, and practices, you'll be led to recognize that, okay, there are difficult conditions in life. We all encounter them. Sometimes they are to do with health. Sometimes they are to do with money. Sometimes they are to do with relationship. The curious thing, they are always to do with some relationship with our body, relationship with other people, relationship with the person we live with, relationship with the material world. And what are we discovering in all those both Eastern and Western approaches? That we construct in our interior a certain story. And actually there are the objective difficulties that we run into in all aspects of life, and yet suffering is more often than not an experience that's emerging because of the interior story we construct for ourselves. And so many of the modalities and the approaches are based on helping you separate between the story you construct on the inside to what is outside of you. And one of the ways this shows up is that each person, we've each in our own biography experienced some kind of a separating experience, separating from the line of bliss, the natural line of development. And we've experienced this trauma or that separation through the unique emphasis of our configuration, our proneness. And so therefore for one person, their core wound, their core pain is, I'm unlovable, I can never be loved again. For a second person, it's there's something bad about me. Whatever I do, I will fail. For a third person is I'm never going to be appreciated. I'm never going to be supported. Those are narrative stories that people live in, and time and again they go through life reactively reconstructing the experience, a bit like the horse whisperer, actually giving their system an opportunity to redeem and absolve that pattern, but in 99 out of 100 recreate that with a loved one, with work, with people in the world. And I'm saying all that because there are many spaces in the world that offer tremendous help for this kind of scenario. And today, in the context of this exploration, I'm saying we recognize that, we want to appreciate that, and that condition, a conditioning world that invites us and programs us to re-narrate the story that recreates suffering. And we want to address that after we said that we're actually, our core impulse is in zone 3, and bringing zone 3 into zone 1 to relieve suffering, to help relieve suffering, to help release reactive response systems, to unlock each person's capacity to create well-being and positive results in all that in all that I do. So that is what I describe, David, as the middle and low impulse in zone 1. And there are many places and many websites and many platforms that their entire brief is actually be there. Here for us, it's part of a bigger picture. Do you want to comment on this now? Would you like me to bring the framing of what I call the high impulse in zone 1?
I think now is good. Now is good, otherwise, because then it'll change. So yeah, I think this is the realm of the therapist. Mm-hmm. It's the realm of most of the work where someone says take a negative and make it positive. That polarization. So it's like taking whatever it is, change the narrative, but it's not usually changing the narrative toward the truth of the human situation. It's changing the narrative into how can I improve my own personal situation, as you said, alleviate suffering. So at this level, a person chooses their own purpose in a way. They're not looking to what is the purpose, trying to discover through that search for truth, but they're looking at what's my purpose and how can I succeed within my purpose? Because it's personal. It's called personal development. And in the dynamic of therapy, so much of the therapy is directed toward how can I at least function within what I call the bar of normal. So the bar of normal is being able to be a functioning member of society and to have within that framework a life of well-being, a satisfactory life. And I cannot help them but think, but at that level, normal is a pretty low bar, actually, but it is the main aim of most therapeutic scenarios that I'm aware of. So it's to help people who've been caught in the pain of the lower end of personal development and the personal psyche, I'd use that expression, and help that person to lift up into the middle, not touching too much on the low, but lift up into the middle and hopefully get into the high, which we might then start to look at modalities that carry names like transcendent, but they're not necessarily transcendent. They're simply at the higher part of a personal development, rather than looking at the bigger picture of what the case actually is for human life on the planet. They're staying within the personal domain. So they're focusing more on psyche in the terms of how I'm working recently. They're focusing more on the personalized psyche than on the bigger picture of the logic of the human situation. So they're working within the current cultural scenarios, which, if you were to go back 1,000 years, the nature of therapy would be different.
Yes.
It is today because the ecology has changed.
And so, 2 comments on what you offered. First is that the first half is indeed the realm of the therapist. The second half is often the realm of the coach and the consultant. So we actually integrated both. Now you are so strongly wired in zone 3, so you made a very fast move that I do need to slow us down and name, because for some people they will struggle in making the leap that you made. You made a very quick assertion that there is a difference between a personal purpose and the purpose of human life. And your assertion that there is a purpose for human life is a zone 3 statement. Now, if you're purely based in the middle in zone 1, that statement, especially if somebody is deeply immersed in the postmodern frame of mind, they could even take offense and see your statement to be something as though you're trying to impose on them something different to what they want to do for themselves. So I'm simply mapping that statement for you came out of a zone 3 appreciation that human life is purposeful. And then within the greater purpose of life, we each get a chance to, first of all, work on alleviating pain and suffering. And secondly, work on optimizing well-being and creating positive results in anything we do. And then we may choose to work on the higher impulse in zone 1, which I'm proposing as a starter place is to liberate my essence, to liberate my higher creational nature. Yeah. So that, and different people will say differently, so that I can be in communion with all that's available for human life from higher sources, in communion with all blessings, with God, with whatever other name you will put to it. And I said earlier that sometimes the higher impulse presents itself as up and out, because throughout history you see time and again people who approached the higher impulse in the monastic mindset, in and through the theology of almost separating and transcending the body and the planetary domain as an idea that that's the way to create that communion. And we addressed that earlier on when we talked about the conundrum of the body system and the brain-mind system, and actually the wisdom of not separating these but rather integrating these. And we suggested then that we will come later to this idea of the activation of the new and higher perceptive systems and higher sense organs that truly can liberate the sense of a higher communion. And what I'm asking you to reflect on is, well, first of all, the recognition that there are those two different impulses, and that often people find that they are in conflict. Like in the first impulse, it's about how can I get the best job and make the most money and be the most effective in my career. Some people will find themselves propelled in that way, in the sense of creating well-being and positive results. And then they will ask, well, but is there a way for me to do that? And at the same time, seek this higher sense of development. What would you say to this conundrum?
Yeah, there's a lot in there. Well, a couple of things. One, I'd say that idea of taking some offense because it could be imposing, just an interesting feature. I don't think of it as me imposing, but that and we'll get to it in zone 3, but more our human situation imposes upon us. Like we might choose not to die, but we're going to die. So that's imposed from our human situation. Whether my psyche likes the idea or not, it's going to happen. And then whatever goes with that. But as you said, that's more a zone 3 consideration, but it impacts into zone 1.
Well, no, I love that. I love it that you keep insisting, bringing the lawful nature of the universe. You say, in other words, you're saying you can go on the top of a tall building and say, I have wings, and try and flap your wings just because you decided to construct that reality and jump, and you'll discover that gravity has a governing power upon you. And you're saying human life is an appearance in a lawful universe in which there is government, and that's going to be the issue that we will endeavor to source in zone 3. So back to zone 1, please.
Okay. And within that, we can make choices from within the limitations of that human situation. So our psyche might want to reach beyond that and even create alternative realities like with the idea of putting on the alternative reality goggles and going into a different world. But the reality is that our system is still within the lawful universe, as you called it. So inside that lawful universe, we then can look at our particular personal development. But it's always within that bigger framework. That framework, from what I see, often gets taken for granted. And then the focus is on what can I do? What's my personal development? So I'm just making sure to include that bigger framework. And then there's what we aim ourselves towards, is what we choose to target. To me, one of the really interesting features of this is in the realm of personal development, people tend to think of themselves as singular. Like, what do I want to do? Well, if their I is based in their emotion on Tuesday, then they may want to go into a retreat and they may want to try and make contact, as you said, with the divine. But then on Thursday, a different part of their system, their mental system, may be in charge, and it's going, oh my Lord, we're a bit short on cash. And then an hour later, a different part of their system is in charge, and it's saying, what's for dinner? And we're not singular unless we do a great deal of deliberate work to become whole. So even the idea of holistic. So our psyche is not a singular thing, in my experience, that our psyche is fragmented into many, many different psyches that we refer to them all as I, but in reality, we would do well to begin to try and discover which impulse, to use that word that you were saying there, which impulse is at play. Is the impulse coming from our emotion? Is it coming from our stomach? Is it coming from our sexual organs? Is it coming from our thinking process? Is it coming because we just read something in the newspaper? Where is the particular impulse coming from? And a lot of alleviating suffering, in my experience working with people, is being able to put boundaries against certain impulses and put the focus on other impulses. So we start to get the sense of being in control. Because personal development does suggest, I think there's conscious personal development and there's semi-conscious and even unconscious. As I've said previously, we're all developing into something, but whether we're doing it consciously or not. So personal development and transformation, in particular, Transform Me, suggests someone who's trying to get hold of the machinery and move it in a particular direction. And that's a very powerful thing. That calls up intention. And I think this is a popular dynamic within the personal development kind of community, which is the power of intention. So intention is very strong. Like, what's my particular intention? And then how much of the fragmented psyche can I get behind that intention? Because if I can only get my mental energy behind it, I've only got 5% of my available energies behind that. But if I can get my emotional energy behind it as well, maybe I get another 30%. And if I can get my physical energy behind it as well, and it starts to amalgamate into a potency of a person being able to say, I choose to do this, and their I actually has some power with it, because it's not something which is appearing on Tuesday but disappearing on Wednesday. So I think that's a big part of the Transform Me personal development middle to high dynamic.
And within that, what increasingly we are realizing is that the impulse in the middle, as you suggested, has about it the need to learn to manage your energies and redirect impulses, and to a degree apply discipline. And that's why you sometimes will need a coach or a buddy system or a mastermind group, all different strategies to help keep you oriented to the set of practices, set of disciplines, set of intentions that you frame for yourself. So in the middle and the low, it's you seeking to develop you. There is a dual suggestion about the impulse to the high first, I noticed every time you come to describe that, you are inserting zone 3 scaffolds. So it's almost as though you're saying, look, in the middle, you begin with how you feel and you try to optimize and attend to what you feel and to your experience. You really need to begin to think in a different way, in a new way, to make a different approach in this impulse if you're not merely going to be driven just by an emotional pursuit, although that is there prevalent in the world. And then there is a hint, and I suggest that is something we will come back to when we do a deeper dive on zone 1. There is a hint in which we are suggesting that, the higher impulse is actually where we get to not just develop ourselves, we get something else to help us develop us. When we are joined to some source, joined to an extra kind of power that's potentially even greater than our discipline, and let that purposeful tethering orchestrate and re-architect and sculpt who we are. And we will in the future come back to describe the various strategies that accompany that journey. So I think what we're describing is you can work on both the impulse in the middle and the impulse in the high. Anything else you'd say to that before I bring zone 2 descriptions?
Yes, I think it goes from the middle to the high. It goes from I can do it to it can do it through me. It's that kind of a shift. It's like the middle level gets you to a point of building control of the equipment, and then there comes the point almost of surrender, and the allowance for something higher to nudge, which is the part of the world very often doesn't quite get yet, but it's there in many religious philosophies. It's there in the study of Zen and Tao and the higher end, the sort of levels of personal psychology work that climb into the higher. It kind of bridges into the work of, let's say, Carl Jung, for example, transcendent psychology. It goes into that idea that something else is nudging, and our head and our heart becomes not only something that we can think and feel with, but something else can nudge through us and bring about a result, because we've prepared the ground.
Yes.
We've kind of made ourselves ready by doing our own work to create a kind of a vessel that something else can then work through. And that's the higher end of personal development, I agree.
And again, that's why we will need to bring zone 3 dimension to that, such that what we are beginning to describe can be asserted with grounded truth rather than fantasy. That's going to be very important. So that sense that you are describing as, instead of I can do it, let it be done through me, in the eternal words, don't do it, let it be done, is through you, is that the invitation. And the way I would leave us as a seed to come back to, that what we are describing are not merely two impulses. We are literally describing a different system in the human. The system in the middle and the system in the high. And we are proposing that the system in the high works on different energy and works on a different set of laws. So to come back to in the future.
Yes.
And with that, let me bring zone 2, where the core inquiry is what and how are we transforming us?
Good. As you do so, one last little something about the high end of zone 1, which is that it's known by so many different names in different religions, different paths. So it's the same idea of something higher nudging. But if you're in Buddhism, I was working recently with someone saying, well, yes, I do healing, but always in the name of Buddha. Speaking to a Christian person, I heal, but in the name of Christ. It's calling upon a particular name or nomenclature, to use that term. But the actual idea holds the same, which is there's a higher power that's working through. The name changed, but the idea holds.
And we're going to bring this dual awareness into zone 2, because in zone 2, we also in the middle seek first to release what holds us back, and then to bring healing, harmony, and wellness to our shared experience and ecology. So in an exploration we call Evolving Together, one of the first conversations was, what is holding us back? And so this is where we are discovering that because of our conditioning, because of what we talked about in zone 1, when we get together, we are often quite instantaneously creating in each other the impulses that dysregulate our nervous system instead of regulate our nervous system. So we've been conditioned to be on alert. We've been conditioned to think that the other person is going to hurt me, or is going to abandon me, or is going to disrespect me, or is going to all the different ways we have experienced through life, the injurious nature of relationships that are not based in the mutuality of intersupport and encouragement, and those create operating systems and prints. And time and again, we replay these stories, we replay these scripts. And so when we come together, there are a variety of practices and modalities that we will employ to release those arresting impulses, to regulate the nervous system, to either dance with each other or laugh with each other or do whatever we need to do with each other to regulate the nervous system, such that we can bring healing, harmony, and wellness, and open up that shared experience. Now, so I work a lot, as you know, with leadership teams in the corporate world. There's something compelling about the corporate arena because the transaction is pretty clear. Come and give us your best time, your best hours when you're most energized, and your best acumen. Help the company's purpose and we'll get you paid. And there is a kind of a clean transaction that often enslaves people. And what it nevertheless enables is it enables people to operate within a certain range. And there again, I find that we need to do a lot of work to re-establish trust, high-level trust, and recognize that high-level trust equal high-performing. Well, you need other factors, but you cannot have high-performing team without having high level of trust. So that is a necessary condition in terms of the collective development, let alone when you're talking about a community of shared purpose. So then, if you were to say, well, what would be the high impulse when a family or a small circle of people, a pod, or whether a community of purpose came together? One way to tell that, to describe that, is that we endeavor to set each other free so that we can each individually and collectively, we can discover the symphonic potential of our evolutionary communion. So that which we were aspiring to find in zone 1, can we actually do that in zone 2? And you find two things: that yes, we love being together in the first place, but then often we run into all those scripts and all those experiences that limit our potential. And when we do the work in the middle, we may be able to set each other free to unlock dimensions of our individual experience and collective experience that we would never dream were possible before we came together with that shared intention and mutuality. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that could sound too ideal to be true, but based on experience, and I'd say zone 2, David, is also the zone of one-on-one relationships and people and families. And that's an area you have worked a lot in. So what would you offer to zone 2 and the awareness of those two impulses in the collective space?
Well, a feature that I noticed, and this comes from individual counseling, not with corporations as a whole, but individuals from within the corporations who I hear reports that inside the corporate world, they're comfortable because they know their purpose, but they really don't like these when the company goes out to socialize. Because once the company goes out to socialize, and then minding up about that, it's all kinds of other psychic factors start to get released. So inside the dome of a shared purpose, there's an agreed contract and people trust each other inside that purpose. So if the purpose is, it doesn't almost matter what it is, as long as there's a contract between the people. But then once moving away from that, then other factors in the psyche are released coming from different parts, and that can bring with it a lot of uncomfortability. So a really interesting expression, this now moving to couples that turned up the other day, was one person that said how he and his wife, they hold each other up. And he meant they hold each other up, they help each other, they're there to support each other. And then I realized, that also means they also hold each other up in the other sense of the word. It's got two meanings. So there's holding each other up and holding each other up in terms of holding, in a way, the reverse, holding someone down. So what does that talk about? It talks about staying within comfort zones. It talks about saying, well, as long as we're within a certain comfort zone, all is well. And so if we're singing together, a good scenario would be the United Nations, where, the amount of divisiveness and distrust between different national interests is a very powerful mirror of the interpersonal relationships. And all of that can get put to one side when there's listening to music, or if there's a singing together, there's a concert, and the idea of being in concert, as you said, symphonic. So, and I find that above a certain level of, and here we start to get into energetics, but when the collective becomes connective, that is where it starts to connect into that higher level, the higher vibration level, it's much easier to have shared trust. So in my work with couples, I've looked at the initial engagement as I call it partners in passion, which is people having a automatic passing of energy backwards and forwards. But it clicks up a level when they can become partners in purpose. They have a shared purpose, a mutually agreed purpose. But it can click up another level when they become partners in evolution. And they start looking to how they can help each other's spiritual journey. So I find that at the lower level of collective development is where we use enforcement, actually, to keep certain things under control. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a police force. We wouldn't need it. If everybody's agreed to be at the middle and higher level collectively, there wouldn't need to be police force, law courts, because we'd have an effective higher level mutual vibration agreement. But life is not like that, as we know. So I look out the window here and I see a police car go by, and it's like we have enforcement in the lower level. And then we have an endeavor towards collective agreed development. Like, as for example, in the corporate arena where you are, there'd be a collective agreed development. There's no need to have these sort of police at the door to make sure that people are not falling below a certain level. But in society as a whole, we do. And then the endeavor of creating, and so many great individuals have attempted this, to create residential communities, not based on economics, but based on, these days they're called intentional communities, like a shared intention. And what does that mean? That you get people from zone one, and they've all come to their own individual kind of idea, and then they find their idea is shared with other people, and they can create an intentional community. But very interesting when studying these, how often other psychic factors which have not been sorted out in individuals climb on board. So one person's house is better than another person's house, and why is that? And all this lower vibration personal stuff can get in the way of the collective. So it's a very interesting dynamic, as you've outlined it, to go from personal development to collective development. And I think collective development depends upon the level of personal development which is actually present. They're interconnected. You can't look at one without the other, really.
That's right. Well, so once again, you are inserting a zone 3 scaffolds into your reasoning, because implicit in what you were describing was your appreciation and grasp that in any collective endeavor, the purpose that pulls the endeavor together defines the level of the energy that is generated in the endeavor. And if it is something that is an ad hoc endeavor, then this energy will be used up quickly. And once that endeavor has fulfilled its purpose or used up the initial energy, there is no continuance. In the corporate sense, there is an implicit for-profit purpose, but having worked in the corporate arena over the last 30 years, it's obvious that many people have endeavored and searched to create a purpose and a mission that's transcendent and is beyond profit. Why is that the case? Because somewhere they understand that intuitively or with deeper contemplation and reasoning, that if you want to build something that not only will sustain itself but will develop perennial capacity to thrive, it needs to find a way to contribute, to co-create, to give back to the larger ecology it is part of, rather than to just extract from that. So many companies and many teams over the last decade or two been on the quest to find what they call their noble purpose, and search to find a bridge from a noble purpose to a novel product or solution they bring to market. What you're describing is that in the intentional community case, where there is perhaps an eternal purpose that will survive people's lifetime, in that it invites something that has generational transmission of the bigger human cause, even there, we may come and be propelled by that, but time and again we will be pulled back by the areas we have not attended to, either individually and collectively. Because development is never even. Each one of us, we make certain headways and progressions along certain developmental lines, only to discover the areas where we have not yet addressed the outage, the developmental outage. So I know we will have an opportunity to come back into this space and attend to more of that. Let me now bring zone 3, which is where we started, where we say in what ways and how do I update my sense making and perception maps, and really the mechanism, the tool set with which, tool set by way of the perception tool set, and also the sense organs, and then the frameworks that I developed that enable me to travel the world and, first of all, disabuse myself out of my illusions and false perceptions. And what we talked about in another conversation, liberate myself from the reactive groupthink, the reactive egregoric, sometimes even mass hysteria groupthink response, so to realize the truth of the human situation on earth. And that is already somewhat gesturing the higher case, because what will often be included here is, well, if you wanted to build a business, you need to build the map with which you can run a business. If you wanted to trade the stock market, you'll need to understand how to map the forces that are shaping the stock market. If you choose to move into education and work with the toddler age or youth or advanced education, you'll need to understand the psychological patterns of the age, and you'll need to develop the map making of the domains you will teach. So this can be domain specific. And in any circumstance, in any domain, in any space, you will need to develop the capacity to make sense. In our case, we came from Israel to America, and we needed to discover the American grammar, not just the grammar of American English, but the behavioral grammar. And then we lived in Florida in the first place, that had certain aspects of the South, even though not like the middle of the Southern America. And then we moved to Seattle, two very different culture codes. If you want to become intelligent about navigating the cultural trends and context you're in, you need to develop the capacity to make sense in that. So all that is part of the impulse to make sense in the world in the middle. And then I'm proposing that there is the endeavor that been central for us when we started in the first conversation, when we explored exoteric, mesoteric, esoteric, when we said we are endeavoring to decode the shape-shifting algorithm of life. So in life in the middle, there is a shape-shifting nature, and yet inside it, there is the core perennial truth. And even as the epoch unfolds and continues to shapeshift, there is a way in which we can come into contact and get tethered to the way the universe works, such as the idea that life is purposeful, such as the idea that really anything we see in the physical world emerged in the first place from an energetic dimension, such as that we cannot fully ultimately solve any of the issues on the world stage, economic problems, social problems, geopolitical problems, climate problems. We cannot solve this meta-crisis, also called the poly-crisis, without engaging the interior dimensions of human life and I will dare say here, the spiritual actuality out of which the physical, biological way of life emanates out of. So this is something I'm seeding that we will have to come back to as part of when we explore what is a major perennial truth versus transitory truth, where, for example, as the last difference I will make, so I can say, well, last night I went to bed at 11 p.m. Okay, that's the truth. It's a true fact of one day. But the bigger actuality that comes out of is that all biological beings on this planet need to go through a process of sleep where there is a mechanism of repair and replenishment of the energy. So one can say, well, why is that the case? And why is that so? What is it about the biological experience whereby you live through the day and you use up the energy reservoir that you developed during your sleep, and you need to repair yourself at the cellular level? This is the kind of inquiry that leads you into the way the universe works, which we described on an earlier conversation in several ways, including when we talked about the planetary program. So what we're saying here in this zone 3, there is the domain-specific, situation-specific map of meaning, way of making sense-making that you will need to develop with culture context or with domain context. And there is the universal appreciation of life you can seek to come into contact with that will enable you to lead whatever it is that you choose to lead. So I said quite a bit there, and I know you have deep roots and tremendous passion about Zone 3. So where would you want to play with that, please?
I'd start. Well, I think Zone 3 is the key way to the remedy for our current human situation. It is the key way to what the world doesn't quite get yet. It makes me think, how different would our world be if our basic education started in Zone 3 first, and then we get into personal development and choice second? Not that we're doing it the right way around in our current world situation, but if our education, first of all, said, look, you're here, you're on a planet. Now, these are the planetary rules. This is what the planet enables, and this is not able to do these things. You can't fly like a bird. You can't, there's various things you can't do. You do have to breathe. Breathing is compulsory. Sleep. I mean, we say, I go to sleep. I think sleep overcame me at 11 o'clock last night. Like, I didn't recharge myself during sleep. The planet, the universe gave me new energy. Something intervened and said, this person needs energy. Soldiers will even sleep on their feet if they've been marching long enough. It's like it's a potency that we have to have. So we would learn about the two primary polarities of human life, as you said, distributing energy and bringing energy in. And that would be part of our primary education. Like, we never really get a primary education except for reading and writing. But what about how our human system actually functions? Not something that's for medical practitioners. That's something for every human to be cognizant of, because we all live in one of these. So, someone gives you a computer, you're going to tend to want to learn what that machine is capable of. So we are able to make our personal development choices from what our equipment is capable of and what the planetary domain within which we live allows. And that would be our starter consideration. Just like you said about I'll take another example. If you're going to get a lion trainer, if you're going to train a lion, the first thing is to learn about the nature of the lion. So the lion trains the trainer before the trainer says, well, I want my lion to fly. Well, lions can't do that. I want my lion to sing over the rainbow. Well, lions can't do that. They can only operate within the domain of what's allowed. The amazing thing I think about the human is our domain is so much larger than we realize. So rather than finding that the truth limits us, as you say, it can actually set us free, to use that expression. It actually opens up possibilities that we don't see if we don't study what our equipment is capable of within the universe within which we live. Because, what if I have clients who study so-called remote viewing, who's trying to send their mind off to Mars and bring back messages? I mean, what if that's part of the human capability? Your mind can travel off to, I don't know, from England, Trafalgar Square, collect some messages and come back. That would be, if that's possible for the human, that's an amazing extra something that we could actually do. But if we stay within psyche limitations that we learn from the education as it is today, how much are we missing? So it just may be that the Zone 3 opens up immense new possibilities rather than being some kind of limitation.
You started by saying, I believe that Zone 3 is the key to the predicament of the human situation on Earth. And what the implication was, we can find there the solutions. Now, implicit in it is why we are in the predicament, because we now experience the large discourse in the world has about it almost complete cancellation of the existence of a Zone 3. And that has been with us, let's say, for a couple of 3 decades. And now with the invention and the innovation of AI and the promulgation of deepfake, not only are we encountering the socially constructed mindset that says, I can create my reality, I can create my truth. I don't need you to tell me what truth is, because I choose to have a different truth. As somebody used to like to say, there are alternative facts or alternative truth. What does that mean, right?
Yeah.
So there is a double bind in this situation. First, that this is where we may be able to escape the predicament of our situation. Second, that this zone is largely being cancelled or taken out of the conversation. And thirdly, that it is most of the dollars invested in this zone today, they are invested in manipulation, the manipulation of what the story is, what the case is, what the truth is, so to speak, to drive your utilitarian or someone else's utilitarian agenda. So this is a major thing, and we would want to come back to it. And you often remind me that people used to go to university to get an education with the ideal of the search for truth, but that has been abandoned. That largely education now has a utilitarian purpose to give you a job, to give you a successful career, rather than to come into contact with universal truth.
Yes. Yeah, I saw the shield of Harvard University this week. It had one word on it, veritas, meaning truth. And I thought that's not an accurate shield anymore. Education for higher paid professions would be a more accurate shield. For most colleges, universities, it's become to be about the economics more than it is about getting closer to the reality of what our situation actually is. Yeah.
Well, the word is at least there. There are many other schools where they voted to change even the words on the shield, so to overtly declare that that's no longer their objective. And this brings us to Zone 4, where we ask about the capabilities and the system transformation that we are seeking to catalyze. Where I'm saying that and suggesting that we begin by looking at, okay, so how do we release pain and anguish? By working to build, to facilitate, to engage in life-giving scenarios, wherever we are, at work, in various professions. You may be in the education space, you may be in the health space, you may be in the technology space. Are you working on something that will alleviate pain and anguish and will facilitate and support life-giving scenarios? And building on that, in the higher impulse, I would suggest that it begins with imagining and initiating and prototyping the new and higher models and ecologies that support healthier, wiser, weller world.
Yeah.
So it's these are spaces that more naturally will emerge out of the work we've done in 3 in 1 and 1 in 3 and 3 in 2 and 2 in 3. But there is also a way in which we remember that the world is us. The world begins inside us. So to the degree that we live and are generative in zone 1, in zone 2, in zone 3 in a robust way, we are already doing work in 4 because we are the world inside ourselves. What would you offer as an early commentary to zone 4?
That really that each individual impacts the world by their actions, by their thoughts, by their feelings, and that impact can be greater or lesser depending upon how, it's a funny word, but how wholesome we are as individuals. And I don't mean like not good or bad. I'm talking about actually being integrated. So a lot of my work is about integrative energetics, I call it. It's like integrating the different psyche factors so that the power that's possible from zone 1 acting within the true domain, which is present and known about in zone 3, can then cooperate into a collective to impact the world. So the 4, almost like a heartbeat, the 4 chambers are working together, and that produces a pulse or an impulse, and that pulse keeps regularly beating every day. And so little by small, we make a person makes a homeopathic difference. One person out of a billion may only be one person, but if what they're issuing into the energies of the planet, the atmosphere of the planet, into the collective with other people is making a genuine difference in ways that the person may very well not be aware of, because we can't see the ripple effect of what we do. And so it's in that sense very encouraging. One can look at the world and go, how can I have an impact? It's impossible on the world of this scale. Well, every day, yes, each one of us has an impact. And so we add up all the many, many little impacts and it changes the world. So in that, there's hope in number 4.
One act of kindness followed by another act of kindness. Last week I went to pick up a car rental in the local Hertz destination branch, and I started a conversation with the person that's managing that local Hertz office, and something came over him, and he described to me how he lost everything because he became addicted to gambling, and how he lost all his businesses, and he said he had 2 businesses, lost all his money and lost his wife-to-be. And he described how what getting a job like this did for him, in that it brought him back into some structure, some framework that he could gradually get refine himself and get some kind of a foundation for his life. And I was there with no other agenda, with no other need, but simply present to him. There was nobody else there. And I said to myself, this is one of those moments. Another human being is sharing their struggle and the story of their struggle with you. And I listened, and I commended him for his determination to reorganize and re-architect his life, and gave him just my presence, which is really more than anything else I could give him. He doesn't need my tips. I can offer 1,000,001 tips, but and sometime I would, but more than anything, I was simply hearing the testimony of his life, and I was giving him the most precious thing one human being can give to another, which is our presence.
Yes.
So for me, that comes out of the work I just do in zone 1 and zone 2 and zone 3, in that I practice stepping into presence. I can't always be present, but I forever practice, and am retethering myself to being fully present in zone 1, such that I may be able to offer the benefit of it in zone 2, such that we may together be able to be more grounded in the truth of the human predicament and the human development challenge, and that when we do so, we impact the world. That there's no way for me to, I didn't leave a camera in this place to see how he would be treating differently the person that walked into the place after I was there. It's not about me with strings to see the impact. There is something about, as you said, in every small act, you spreading kindness, touching people's lives, free of the attribution needs, simply because we're here actually together in this extraordinary part of the universe that flies in an amazing speed.
Yeah.
And we share this ecology, and more often than not, we are injurious with each other. And if we can choose differently, we already make a huge difference in zone 4. So how about that as an interim conversation when we had no plan whatsoever for today, to give us a bridge from here to potentially choosing to go deeper on each of those zones and open up more of the dimensions that we would want to attend to in each of those 4 spaces.
Yes. Well, each of them deserve diving deeper into and opening them up further. And then the interrelationship between the 4 chambers. I can't help but view them right now as like chambers of a beating heart, and they actually interpulse one to the other. They're not compartmentalized like a linear diagram, and it's all we can show on the screen. But I get this picture of more the aorta, and the actual 4 chambers of the heart, and it's pulsing out a signal, which is the 4 together create a power that one on its own doesn't have. So as we deepen one, it'll then cast further insight into another, and even the ordering of them. It's like, it might be that a particular heartbeat starts in 3 and then it pulses into 1. So it's like a 1 going to 3, but I get the sense of a living heartbeat inside the 4 chambers. So that then produces, in a way, kindness, because our hearts all speak the same language. We're all of our hearts are on a heart signal, and I think all of our kidneys are on. They all speak kidney to each other. We're very much the same, except in our psyche. So we find the commonality.
Well, so how about if we just leave it there with this beautiful imagery you offered of the heart
and that beautiful story from the Hertz rent-a-car
to be developed further when we come together again. Thank you, David.
Absolutely. Thank you, Aviv.
Along with our website at portalsofperception.org, Portals is also available on YouTube and on all podcast platforms, as well as social media. You can become an active member and join the conversation in community events. And you can help us get the word out by liking this content and by sharing it with your friends.